This is Chapter 11, Discussion Number 4, America Starts to Grow Up. It is important to remember that when the United States first won its independence from Great Britain, that it was not an extremely large country. The colonies only extended, in actuality, sometimes 100 to 150 miles inland of the Atlantic coast. The rest, while being claimed by the European power of Great Britain and won by the United States, wasn't truly part of the United States experience for quite some time after that. Now, after the peace treaty, the United States gained all the way to the Mississippi River, though in actuality Great Britain did not leave until 1812. Before 1812, though, they were able to get the Louisiana Purchase, which expanded the United States beyond the Mississippi River, what they bought from France and Napoleon. So the United States had expanded tremendous amounts, and they actually then needed to kind of fill in that empty space, and did that for a substantial amount of time through the 1800s and 1900s. Now, because the United States was expanding, and because the United States saw itself as an example of what countries of the world could be, they considered themselves to be of the manifest destiny, that it was the cause of the United States which gave them the right and the privilege to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean, because the United States was that great and awesome of a place to be, not necessarily because of great temperatures or because of great military victories, but because they believed that the United States had a great purpose and a great reason to exist with the Constitution and the guaranteeing of rights. And so the Louisiana Purchase actually pretty much doubled the size of the United States as it expanded across the North Atlantic continent. Now, but we still have that problem of true rights for all people in the United States, because for essentially the way that it was seen politically, it was the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to own property was guaranteed only to the European white guys. And it was going to take a substantial amount of political enmity and difficulty in order to expand those rights into people of different color and to women. Now, the color part, hopefully you realize, was the American Civil War. The opposition to slavery was led by Frederick Douglass, a slave who had been able to purchase his freedom, and William Lloyd Garrison, who was a newspaper editor in, I believe it was Boston. The southern states where the slavery was seceded from the United States, and they wanted to become their own country because they were tired, in their interpretation, of the national government extending the power into the states and telling them what they could do. Through the American Civil War, which is the bloodiest battles of the United States history, the South lost the war, and you can point to economic reasons, that they had fewer men in order to fight, and they had fewer resources for the equipment of the battles, and that brought about their defeat in the Civil War. After the end of the Civil War, it was then established that African Americans were no longer slaves, that they could be free and independent, and that was the by law definition of what was supposed to happen. However, due to some quick thinking or some sidestepping of the issue, the South was able to engender the idea of separate but equal, which meant that the African Americans were free and they were technically equal, but they were treated differently, and there were several restrictions put on them so that they could not participate in the society as the white people did. And the women were in the same boat, and they were also restricted in how they could participate in the United States political and economic spectrum, and they did not get their opportunity to vote until even the 1910s. But when we get from the late 1800s through the early 1900s, we see a tremendous amount of expansion in the United States economy. The Industrial Revolution, the second wave, so to speak, brought on by humongous amounts of capital wealth and different inventions that increased productivity, led by the likes of John D. Rockefeller, who initiated and brought about tremendous amounts of petroleum, Andrew Carnegie, who led the steel which was these two ideas were then used to build and power much of the expansion of American productivity to become the envy of the world of what was going on. The populists and progressives are another political movement, though, that we see cropping up in the late 1800s and the early 1900s that everyone kind of looks to and says, hey, that's a really good idea, or I wish the government would step in and help out the little guy here. And while the populists and progressives tried to establish themselves politically and become a major political party, they couldn't quite make that happen. However, a lot of their ideas were adopted by the Republican Party and by the Democrat Party into their processes, and so a lot of the progressive ideas got instilled into American politics, such as union protections, minimum wages, and other ideas to help the industrial worker. This concludes discussion number 4, America Starts to Grow Up, as part of Chapter 11, The Growth of Western Democracies. This also concludes the chapter.